The room was full of laughter until I raised my glass and mentioned the $80 million sale. My mother, who had ignored me for years, choked and dropped her fork, staring like she had heard her name in an indictment. They did not know I was not bragging. I was springing the trap they had set themselves. When the envelope on the table opened, the family realized the person begging for mercy today was the one who had sold me out back then. My name is Violet Parker. I stood on the front porch of the house where I grew up, watching my breath plume into the freezing Illinois night air. The suburbs of Chicago had a specific way of looking perfect while freezing you to the bone. Every house on the street was a carbon copy of festive cheer, draped in thousands of twinkling white lights, with inflatable snowmen guarding the driveways and wreaths perfectly centered on oak doors. It was a picturesque middle-class fortress, the kind of place where people smiled with their teeth but never with their eyes. Inside my coat pocket, my hand was clenched into a fist, not from the cold, but from the sheer force of will it took to remain standing there. I was 30 years old, yet standing on this welcome mat made me feel like the scared, invisible teenager I had been a decade ago. But I was not that girl anymore. The leather briefcase in my left hand was heavy, not just with paper, but with the weight of a reckoning that was 5 years overdue. I rang the doorbell. The sound echoed inside, a two-tone chime that I had heard in my nightmares. I waited. Usually, coming here meant facing a wall of indifference. But tonight was going to be different. Tonight, I had been invited. That fact alone should have been a warning sign flashing in neon red. The door swung open. My mother, Darla Parker, stood there. She was wearing a deep red velvet dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her hair was sprayed into an immobile helmet of blonde perfection, and her makeup was flawless, designed to hide the wrinkles of a woman in her late 50s who spent too much time frowning. For a second, the old reflex kicked in. I expected her to look through me, to turn her head and speak to someone behind me, or to simply walk away as if the wind had blown the door open. That was her signature move, the silent treatment. Darla did not yell. She erased. She had ignored me for years, punishing me for sins I had never actually committed, mostly the sin of not being her golden child. But tonight, Darla smiled. "Violet," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that tasted like saccharin. "You made it. Come in, darling. It is freezing out there." She reached out and touched my arm. Her fingers were cold. I did not flinch. Though every nerve ending in my body wanted to recoil, I stepped inside, the warmth of the hallway hitting me instantly, carrying the scent of roasting turkey, cinnamon candles, and expensive perfume. It smelled like Christmas. It smelled like a lie. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced this. We walked into the dining room. The table was set for a magazine photo shoot. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier. The silverware was polished to a mirror finish, and a massive centerpiece of holly and pine cones blocked the view across the table. My father, Warren, was already seated at the head, nursing a tumbler of scotch. My brother, Mason, sat on the right, checking his phone with the bored arrogance of a man who believes the world waits for him. "Violet is here," Darla announced, clapping her hands together softly. Warren looked up, his eyes glassy. "Good to see you, kid," he mumbled, before looking back at his drink. Mason looked up, sliding his phone into his pocket. He flashed that practiced corporate grin, the one he used to charm investors before the numbers came out. "Hey, sis. Long time. You look simple. It suits you." "Mason?" I nodded. I did not take the bait. I was wearing a charcoal gray wool sweater and black slacks. No jewelry, no makeup. I looked like exactly what they thought I was, the struggling, black sheep daughter who barely scraped by. Sit, Darla urged, pulling out the chair directly across from Mason. This was the guest of honor spot. In the past, on the rare occasions I was allowed at the table, I was shoved to the corner, near the kitchen door, so I could help clear the plates. Tonight, I was center stage. I sat down. placing the briefcase on the floor beside my chair. I saw Darla's eyes snap to it. It was a quick, predatory glance, sharp and hungry. Before she masked it with that plastic smile again, she lingered for a fraction of a second too long on the leather bag. So that is it. I thought, you know. Or you think you know. Let me get you some wine, Darla said, hovering over me with a bottle of expensive Cabernet. We have so much to catch up on. It has been, 3 years? 5, I said. 5 years since we last spoke. 3 years since you changed the locks. Darla laughed, a tinkling, hollow sound. Oh, Violet, do not be dramatic. It is Christmas. Let us leave the past in the past. We are just so glad you decided to be reasonable and come home. We were worried about you, were we not? Warren. Terrified, Warren grunted, finally putting his drink down. We heard things have been difficult for you, Mason said, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. He picked up a breadstick and snapped it in half. Job market is tough, especially for someone with your resume gaps. I get by, I said, unfolding my napkin and placing it on my lap. We just want to help, Darla said, pouring the wine until it nearly touched the rim of my glass. We are family, after all. And families help each other, especially when it comes to complicated matters. Future planning. She was circling it. They were all circling it. They knew something was happening with the business assets Grandma Evelyn had set up, but they did not know the full picture. They thought I was drowning in paperwork I did not understand. They thought I had come here to surrender, to sign the papers they had been mailing me for months, begging for their expertise to save me from ruin. I appreciate the concern, I said, picking up the wine glass but not drinking. I swirled the dark red liquid. It has been an interesting year. Interesting is one word for it, Mason smirked. I heard the logistics sector is taking a beating. Northgate Process Solutions. That is where you are working, right, clerk? Something like that, I said. Dinner was served. The conversation was a minefield of passive-aggressive jabs wrapped in concern. Darla asked if I was eating enough because I looked gaunt. Warren asked if I still drove that death trap of a sedan. Mason talked about his new country club membership and the bonus he was expecting, dropping numbers casually to see if I would flinch. I ate quietly. I cut my turkey into precise, small squares. I watched them. I watched how Darla's eyes kept darting to the briefcase on the floor. I watched how Mason's leg bounced nervously under the table, shaking the silverware slightly. I watched Warren sweating despite the air conditioning. They were tense. They were desperate. They needed me to sign something, or agree to something, and they were trying to butter me up before the knife came out. You know, Darla said, putting her fork down. Mason has been looking into that little inheritance Evelyn left. The structure is a mess. Violet, a legal nightmare. You could be liable for millions in debts if it is not managed by professionals. Professional, I repeated. Like Mason. I have experience, Violet, Mason said, puffing out his chest. I manage portfolios 10 times that size. I am doing you a favor. Mom and Dad are just trying to protect you. You sign the management rights over to the family trust, and we handle the headaches. We will even cut you a monthly stipend, $2,000, tax-free. You could quit that clerk job. $2,000? They were offering me crumbs from a loaf they thought they already owned. It is a generous offer, Warren added. Take it. Vi, do not be stupid. I looked around the table. The candlelight flickered in their eyes. Greed. It was pure, unadulterated greed masquerading as parental love. They thought I was the same girl who used to cry in her room because Mommy did not say goodnight. They thought I was broken. I reached down and touched the handle of the briefcase. Darla stopped breathing for a second. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the soft jazz playing in the background. I have some news of my own, Mason smirked. Did you get a promotion, senior clerk? I ignored him. I lifted my glass. I think a toast is in order. They hesitated, then lifted their glasses. They thought this was it, the capitulation, the surrender. To family, Darla said softly, her eyes gleaming. To the sale, I said. I paused. The glass was cool against my fingertips. I closed the deal this morning, I continued, my voice conversational, as if discussing the weather. The cold storage chain, the logistics network, all of it. The wire transfer hit the holding account at 4 o'clock this afternoon. $80 million. I took a sip of wine. For a moment, there was absolute silence. It was not the quiet of a library. It was the vacuum of space. The air left the room. Then, the sound came. Darla choked. It was a violent, guttural sound. The wine she had been sipping went down the wrong pipe, and she spasmed, dropping her fork onto the fine china with a deafening clatter. She coughed, hacking loudly, her hand flying to her throat. Her eyes bulged, staring at me, wide and terrified. It was the look of a woman who had just heard her own execution order. "Darla!" Warren shouted, half rising from his chair to pat her back. But he was staring at me, his mouth hanging open. Mason froze. His glass was halfway to his mouth. He lowered it slowly, but his hand was shaking so badly that wine sloshed over the rim and stained the pristine white tablecloth. The red stain spread like blood. "What?" Mason whispered. His voice cracked. "What did you say?" $80 million. I enunciated clearly. Cash deal, no stock options, no earnouts, just cash. Darla was still coughing, her face turning a blotchy red, but she was waving Warren away. Her eyes locked on mine. The mask was gone. The loving mother was gone. In her place was a panic-stricken stranger. "You sold it," Mason stammered. "You cannot sell it. You do not have the authority. The papers, the trust." "The trust is solid," I said calmly, "and I am the sole beneficiary and the sole executive officer. I checked, my lawyers checked, the buyer's lawyers checked. It turns out, when you ignore your daughter for 5 years, you miss a lot of details about her life, like the fact that she learned how to read a contract." "That is impossible," Warren rasped. "Evelyn said it was a legacy asset. You cannot just liquidate it." "I can," I said. And I did. I looked at my mother. She had finally stopped coughing, wiping her mouth with a napkin. Her chest was heaving. She looked small. "Why?" Darla whispered. Her voice was hoarse. "Why would you do that without telling us? We are your family." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Family?" I asked. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. "Mom, you have not called me on my birthday in 4 years. You did not invite me to Thanksgiving. When I lost my apartment 2 years ago and called you for a loan, you sent me a voicemail saying I needed to learn resilience. But you knew about the company. You knew about the sale rumors. You knew everything." I looked at Mason. "And you have been sending emails to my competitors for months, trying to devalue the assets so you could buy them cheap through a shell company. Did you think I would not find out? Did you think I was too stupid to trace an IP address?" Mason turned pale. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Of course you do," I said. I reached down and picked up the briefcase. I placed it on the table. The heavy thud it made caused the silverware to jump. Darla stared at the leather bag as if it contained a bomb. In a way, it did. "You guys thought I came here to beg," I said softly. "You thought I came here to ask for your help, to let Big Brother Mason take the wheel, because poor little Violet cannot handle the big bad business world. But I did not come here to ask for anything." I clicked the latches open. Snap, snap. The sound was like 2 gunshots in the quiet room. "I came here to return something," I said. I reached inside and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I tossed it onto the center of the table, right on top of the holly centerpiece. It slid off and landed in front of Darla's plate. "What is this?" Darla asked, her hands trembling as she reached for it. "Open it," I commanded. She hesitated. "You ignored me for years," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "But you were watching me. You tracked my credit score. You hired a private investigator to see who I was dating. You monitored the registry deeds. You watched everything. Waiting for me to fail so you could swoop in and take what Grandma Evelyn left me. Darla froze, her hand on the envelope flap. You thought you were the hunters, I said, but you were just the bait. Violet, stop, Mason said, standing up. This is insane. You are drunk. Sit down, Mason, I said, not breaking eye contact with my mother. Or I will call the buyer and tell them about the embezzlement scheme you have been running at your current firm. Oh yes, I know about that too. Due diligence is a wonderful thing. Mason sat down. He collapsed into his chair as if his strings had been cut. Open it, Mom, I said. Darla tore the envelope open. She pulled out the stack of documents. Her eyes scanned the first page, and the color drained from her face completely. She looked like a ghost. This, she gasped. This is... If you want to talk about family, I said, leaning back in my chair and picking up my wine glass again. If you want to have a real conversation, then we need to start from the beginning. We need to talk about the Christmas you decided I was not worth keeping. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like victory. Read it, I said. Read it out loud so Dad and Mason can hear what you did. The room was silent, save for the faint sound of Silent Night playing from the stereo in the living room. The irony was perfect. Darla looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes, not tears of sorrow, but tears of a cornered animal. She knew that the game was over, and that for the first time in her life, she did not hold the cards. Go on, I said. We have all night to understand the silence that fell over the Christmas dinner table. You have to understand the noise that filled my childhood. It was not the noise of shouting or fighting. It was the deafening sound of Mason being celebrated, and the quiet, crushing hum of me being tolerated. Growing up in the Parker household was a lesson in subtle geography. Mason occupied the center of the map. I lived on the edges. If Mason got a B on a report card, a tutor was hired the next day to ensure his genius was properly nurtured. If I brought home an A, it was acknowledged with a nod, as if my success was a happy accident that did not require investment. Mason got the new hockey gear, the private coaching, and the car on his 16th birthday. I got the hand-me-down bicycle and the lecture about the value of earning my own way. I learned early on that I was the figure-it-out child. My mother, Darla, did not hate me. Hate requires passion. Hate requires energy. Darla simply found me inconvenient. I was a variable she could not control, a reflection in the mirror she did not like. Mason was her masterpiece, a projection of everything she wanted the family to be: charming, athletic, and malleable. I was quiet, observant, and stubborn. By the time I graduated college, the dynamic had calcified into a hard, unyielding reality. I remember the day I packed my bags to leave. Mason was already working at a mid-level firm, a job Dad had called in a favor to get. He was living in a condo downtown that our parents were subsidizing until he got on his feet. You will be fine, Violet, Darla had said, standing in the doorway as I wrestled a box of books into my beat-up sedan. She did not offer to help lift it. You are resourceful. That is your strength. Mason needs structure. You are a survivor. It sounded like a compliment, but it felt like a dismissal. The years that followed were a blur of gray skies and neon open signs. I moved into a studio apartment in a neighborhood where the police sirens were the lullaby. The heating was temperamental, rattling and hissing like a dying animal, leaving me shivering under 3 blankets during the brutal Illinois winters. I worked everywhere. I was a barista who burned her fingers on steam wands for minimum wage. I was a data entry clerk in a windowless basement. I answered phones for a dentist who yelled when the schedule was empty. I applied for real jobs. I sent out hundreds of resumes. I had the degree, I had the grades, and I had a hunger that none of the other candidates had. But the rejection emails piled up like snowdrifts. We went with a candidate with more specific experience. You are not quite the right cultural fit. I was drowning in bills. There were months when I had to choose between paying the electric bill or buying fresh produce. I ate a lot of instant noodles and peanut butter. During those hard years, I would call home. It was a reflex, an instinctual desire for safety that I could not shake. "Mom, I am short on rent this month," I said once, my voice tight with shame. "Just $200. I will pay you back when my next check clears." There was a pause on the other line. "Violet," Darla sighed, the sound of a martyr being asked to carry one more cross. "If we bail you out, you will never learn. Mason is navigating a very high-pressure environment right now, and we are focusing our resources on ensuring his stability. You have always been the independent one. Figure it out. Figure it out." The family motto for the daughter they did not want to worry about. But there was one person who saw me. Grandma Evelyn was not a warm woman. She did not bake cookies or knit sweaters. She was a creature of iron and spine, a woman who had run a logistics empire in the 70s when men still thought women belonged in the typing pool. She was my father's mother, but she looked at Warren with a mixture of disappointment and boredom. She looked at me with calculation. We would meet for lunch once a month at a diner halfway between my terrible apartment and her estate. She insisted on paying, but she never let me order the expensive items. "How is the job search?" she would ask, cutting her steak with surgical precision. "Slow," I would admit. "I am working 2 shifts at the coffee shop to cover the gap." "Good," she would say. "Hard work clears the mind. Do not complain. Soling shoes is how you learn the shape of the road." Evelyn never offered me money. She never offered to pay my rent. At the time, I thought she was just like them, cold, indifferent, believing that suffering was a necessary character builder, but I was wrong. She was not watching me suffer. She was watching me endure. She was testing the steel to see if it would break. I did not know it then. But while I was counting quarters to do my laundry, Evelyn was making moves. She had seen the softness in Mason, the way he crumbled under pressure, the way he looked for a shortcut every time the road got steep, and she had seen the grit in me, about 4 years ago. Evelyn started liquidating some of her older, stagnant assets. She quietly purchased a struggling logistics network in the Midwest. It was not glamorous. It was a chain of cold storage warehouses and a fleet of refrigerated trucks that moved food from the farm belt to the cities. It was a business of ice and diesel, of profit margins measured in pennies per mile. She named the holding company VP, Logistics. She set up a legal structure that was watertight. The ownership was placed in a dormant trust. The beneficiary was me, not the family, not Warren, not Mason, me. But here was the catch she did not tell me. Evelyn was old school. She believed that inheriting wealth before you understood the value of a dollar was a curse. She wanted me to season. She wanted me to hit the bottom, so that when I finally rose, I would never let anyone drag me down again. She hired a temporary management team to run the day-to-day operations, with strict instructions to reinvest every dime of profit back into the company. The plan was to hand me the keys when I turned 30, or when she passed away, whichever came first. "You have a good head for numbers, Violet," she told me once, staring at me over her reading glasses. "Better than your father. He thinks business is about shaking hands. It is not. It is about knowing where the bodies are buried and knowing how to dig." "I am just a barista, Grandma." I had laughed, wiping a coffee stain off my sleeve. "For now," she had said. "For now." Meanwhile, the distance between me and my immediate family grew into a canyon. Mason was climbing the corporate ladder, or rather, falling up it. He would show up at the rare family gatherings I attended wearing Italian suits, making jokes about my thrift store clothes. "Still finding yourself, Vi?" he would ask, swirling his scotch. "You know, you really need to be more realistic. The economy is booming for people who actually want to work. Maybe you are just, I do not know, too artistic for the real world." "I work 60 hours a week, Mason," I would reply. "But is it career work?" he would counter, smiling that shark smile. "Or is it just labor?" He made me feel small. He made me feel like my struggle was a result of my incompetence, not a result of a system that was harder to crack from the bottom than from the middle. And Darla perfected the art of the wall. The holidays were the hardest. I would spend Thanksgiving alone in my apartment because I could not afford the train ticket home, and Darla forgot to offer to buy it until the day before. When prices were triple, I would eat a turkey sandwich from the deli and scroll through social media, seeing photos of the Parker family dinner. There was Mason, carving the bird. There was Warren, raising a glass. There was Darla, laughing. They looked complete without me. One snowy afternoon, about 6 months before the dinner where I dropped the bomb, I tried to call Evelyn. I had not heard from her in weeks. The diner lunches had stopped. Darla answered the phone at the big house. "I am looking for Grandma," I said. "Is she there?" "She is resting," Darla said. Her voice clipped. "She is not taking calls. Is she okay?" I called her cell and it went to voicemail. "She is getting older, Violet. She gets confused. Honestly, it upsets her when you call. You bring all that chaotic energy, all your problems. It is better if you just let her be." "I do not bring problems," I protested. "I just want to talk to her." "We are handling her care," Darla said. "Mason and I have been going over her affairs. It is a lot of work. We do not need you complicating things. Just stay in your lane. Violet, we will call you if anything changes." She hung up. I sat in my freezing apartment, staring at the phone. I felt a heavy, suffocating weight in my chest. I believed her. That was the tragedy of it. I believed that I was the problem. I believed that my grandmother, the only person who had ever looked at me with respect, was finally seeing me through Darla's eyes as a burden, a failure, a disappointment. I did not know that at that very moment. Evelyn was asking for me. I did not know that she was asking Mason why Violet had not visited. I did not know that Mason was telling her, "Violet is busy. Grandma, she is traveling. She said she does not have time for family right now." They were cutting the lines. They were isolating the asset, because by then, they had found the paperwork. Mason, in his helpful review of Evelyn's estate as her health declined, had stumbled across the existence of VSP Logistics. He had seen the valuation. He had seen the growth charts. He had seen a company that had quietly grown into a titan of the regional supply chain, worth tens of millions of dollars, and he had seen my name on the deed. I can only imagine the conversation that happened in that dining room when I was not there, the panic, the outrage. Violet. That girl. She cannot run a company. She will ruin it. She will sell it for pennies. She does not deserve it. They convinced themselves that stealing it from me was a moral imperative. They were not thieves in their own eyes. They were stewards. They were saving the legacy from the incompetent daughter. So while I was heating up canned soup and wondering if I could afford a new winter coat, my family was meticulously planning how to transfer the future that belonged to me into their own pockets. They thought I was white trash. They thought I was ignorant. They thought I was already beaten. They had no idea that the chaos Darla despised was actually the very thing Evelyn was banking on. I was not afraid of the cold. I was not afraid of the dark. And I was certainly not afraid of a fight. But sitting there in my studio, listening to the dial tone, I felt like I had nothing. I felt like the world had finally confirmed what my mother had always silently screamed: I was unnecessary. That belief nearly broke me. But it is also what made me dangerous. Because when you believe you have nothing left to lose, you stop being afraid of the consequences. And when the first crack in their lie appeared, I was not looking for an apology. I was looking for a weapon. The trap was not sprung with a bang. It was not a dramatic ambush in a dark alley. It happened in the soft, warm light of my father's study, surrounded by the smell of old paper and expensive pipe tobacco, on a Tuesday afternoon that felt entirely ordinary. It began when Grandma Evelyn went away. She had announced a trip to Europe, a grand tour, she called it, ostensibly to visit old friends and perhaps look into some thermal shipping technologies in Germany. It was a 3-month itinerary. Looking back, I realized the timing was not accidental, but for my parents, it was the window of opportunity they had been praying for. With the matriarch out of the country and communications spotty, due to her dislike of modern roaming plans, the wolves did not just circle. They knocked on the front door. I was summoned to the house, not for dinner, but for a strategy session. When I arrived, the dining table was covered in documents, stacks of white paper, tabbed with colorful sticky notes, looked like a miniature city skyline. Warren sat at the head of the table, looking grave. Darla stood behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder, projecting the image of the supportive wife facing a terrible burden. "Violet, sit down," Warren said, gesturing to a chair. He did not offer me a drink. This was business. "What is all this?" I asked, eyeing the paperwork. "It is the business," Darla said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your grandmother is brilliant, obviously, but she is getting old, and this new venture she set up for you, the logistics chain, it is becoming complicated." Warren took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "The regulatory environment is a nightmare. Interstate commerce laws, Department of Transportation compliance, liability insurance. Evelyn set up the ownership in your name to bypass some estate taxes, which was smart, but she left you exposed." Exposed? I felt a cold prickle of fear. Exposed to what? "Liability," Warren said, putting his glasses back on. "Personal liability. If a truck crashes and spoils a shipment of insulin, you are sued. If a warehouse worker slips on ice, you are sued. They could come after everything: your car, your savings, your future wages. You could be bankrupt before you even 30. I was 25, working as a junior analyst at Northgate Process Solutions, earning $42,000 a year. The idea of being sued for millions was a terror I could not comprehend. I was already terrified of my check engine light coming on. I could not handle corporate litigation. "I do not know anything about running a logistics company," I admitted, my voice small. "Grandma said she had managers." "Managers manage," Mason said. Walking into the room, I had not noticed him standing by the window. He was wearing a crisp blue suit, looking every inch the young executive. "But owners are responsible. Look, Vi, we are not trying to scare you. We are trying to insulate you." He slid a document toward me. It was thick, bound with a heavy staple. "What is this?" "It is a protective stewardship agreement," Warren explained, "and a limited power of attorney. Basically, it allows Mason and me to handle the boring stuff, the filings, the compliance, the legal headaches. We act as your proxies. You remain the beneficiary. The money is still yours, but we take the bullets. We step in front of the firing squad so you do not have to. We just want you to be safe," Darla added softly. "You have enough to worry about with your job and your situation. Let the men handle the heavy lifting." I looked at the papers. The language was dense, filled with words like indemnification, irrevocable proxy, and fiduciary discretion. It looked like Greek to me, but I looked at my father's face. He looked tired. He looked worried. I thought he was worried for me. "Is Grandma okay with this?" I asked. "We emailed her the summary," Mason said quickly. "She agrees it is for the best. She wants you protected. Violet, she does not want her gift to become a noose around your neck." I picked up the pen. I signed. I signed the power of attorney. I signed the information access waiver. I signed the document that effectively gave Mason the right to sit in the CEO's chair while I sat in a cubicle 10 miles away. "Good girl," Warren said, collecting the papers with a speed that should have made me suspicious. "Now, you do not need to worry about a thing. For the next year." I lived a double life, though I was only aware of one half of it. By day, I was a drone at Northgate Process Solutions. It was a soul-sucking place with fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry hornets. My job consisted of verifying invoices for industrial piping. It was tedious, mind-numbing work. I sat in a gray fabric box from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, listening to my coworkers complain about their diets and their ex-husbands. I was barely making ends meet. My rent went up. My student loan payments were eating a third of my income. And I was driving a car that shook violently whenever I went over 50 miles an hour. Meanwhile, Mason was playing tycoon. He started representing me at board meetings. I would see him occasionally, and he would drop little nuggets of information, designed to make him look heroic, and the business looked terrifying. "Had a hell of a time with the unions in Gary today," he would say, loosening his tie as he poured himself a drink at my parents' house. "They wanted a strike. I had to negotiate for 6 hours. You would have hated it. Vi, screaming matches, threats." "Thank you," I would say, genuinely grateful. "I do not know how you do it." "It is what family does," he would reply, sipping the scotch that was likely bought with the company expense account I technically owned. But slowly, the cracks in the facade began to appear. They were small at first, like hairline fractures in a windshield. It started with the mail. I never received bank statements for the company. Warren had told me that all official correspondence went to their address for safekeeping, but I stopped receiving my own personal mail too. Birthday cards from distant cousins, tax forms, even jury duty summons. They all seemed to vanish. When I asked Darla, she shrugged. "The post office is terrible these days," she said. "Maybe you should get a P.O. box." Then came the silence from the outside world. I was desperate to leave Northgate. I knew I was capable of more. I started applying for higher-level positions in supply chain management, marketing, even office administration. I had a degree, I had experience, and I was good at interviews. I would sit down with hiring managers, and we would click, we would laugh. They would talk about next steps and onboarding, and then nothing, ghosted. After one particularly promising interview with a logistics firm in Chicago, a job that would have doubled my salary, I waited by the phone for a week. Finally, I called the hiring manager, a woman named Sarah, who had practically offered me the job in the room. "I am sorry, Violet," she said, her voice chilly. "We decided to move in a different direction. Can I ask why?" I pressed, desperate. "You seemed so positive last week." There was a long pause. "We check references thoroughly. Ms. Parker, we need people who are stable, people who are team players. The feedback we got was that you have issues with authority and a history of erratic behavior." "References," I stammered. "But I only listed my supervisor at Northgate." "We do our own background checks," she said, and hung up. I sat in my car in the parking lot, the phone slipping from my hand. Erratic behavior. Issues with authority. I was the most boring, compliant employee at Northgate. I never missed a day. I never talked back. Who were they talking to? The paranoia set in like a rot. I started to feel like I was moving through a world where invisible walls had been erected specifically to contain me. I felt a hand on the back of my neck, holding me down, keeping me in that gray cubicle, keeping me poor, keeping me dependent. I tried to talk to Darla about it. "Mom, something is weird," I said one Sunday. "I cannot get a new job. It is like someone is bad-mouthing me." Darla was arranging flowers in the kitchen. She did not look up. "Maybe you are just aiming too high. Violet, you have always had delusions of grandeur. Northgate is a good, steady job. You should be grateful." "I am not delusional," I said, my voice rising. "I am qualified. And what about the company, Grandma's company? Mason says it is struggling. But I saw a truck with our logo on the highway yesterday. It looked brand new." Darla froze. She turned slowly, holding a pair of gardening shears. "Mason is saving that company from ruin," she said, her voice ice cold. "He is working himself to death to clean up the mess your grandmother left. Do not you dare question him. Do not you dare be ungrateful. If you ask about the business one more time, I will tell Mason to walk away, and you can deal with the bankruptcy lawyers yourself." "Is that what you want?" "No," I whispered. "No, I just—" "Then be quiet," she said, and snipped the head off a rose. She had shut the door, click, locked. I stopped asking. I stopped fighting. I went to work. I came home. I ate instant noodles. I accepted that this was my life, a life of mediocrity and mysterious failures. But the thing about lies is that they require constant maintenance. You have to patch every leak, sever every connection, and eventually, you miss one. It happened 3 months later. Grandma Evelyn had returned from Europe, but she had suffered a mild stroke while abroad. She was recovering in a private rehabilitation facility. My parents had told me no visitors were allowed doctor's orders. She needs absolute quiet, Warren had said. Stress could kill her. So I stayed away, sending cards that I suspected Darla threw in the trash. But Evelyn was not comatose, and she was not stupid. One afternoon, a phone rang in her private room at the rehab center. It was her personal cell phone, an ancient flip phone she kept in her purse, the number known only to a handful of people from the old days. She picked it up. Hello? Her voice was weak, slightly slurred, but sharp. Evelyn, it is Frank Miller. A booming voice came through. Frank was an old supplier, a man who ran a fleet of refrigerated railcars out of Detroit. I hope I am not disturbing you, I called the main office. But your grandson Mason, he is a hard man to reach. Mason, Evelyn asked, confused. Why are you calling Mason? Well, for the renewal contract, Frank said. The expansion into the Dakota Territory, big moves. Evelyn, I have to say, I was skeptical when I heard you were stepping back. But the kid is aggressive. Although, I gotta tell you, the new payment terms are a bit stiff. Net 30 is tough for us right now. Evelyn sat up in her hospital bed. The fog in her brain cleared instantly. Expansion, she repeated. Frank, what expansion? The $80 million push. Frank laughed. Don't play coy with me. I saw the press release in the Trade Journal. VP, Logistics announces strategic restructuring under new management. Mason is listed as the managing director. Evelyn's grip tightened on the phone until her knuckles turned white. Frank, she said, her voice trembling with a rage that was far stronger than her stroke. Read me that press release. Read me every single word. As Frank read, the picture became clear. They were not managing the company. They were not protecting me. They were acting as if they owned it. And more importantly, they were leveraging the assets, taking out massive loans against the equity to fund an expansion I had never approved, likely skimming the consulting fees off the top. They were gambling with my inheritance, and they had silenced me to do it. Evelyn thanked Frank and hung up. She did not call Darla. She did not call Warren. She lay back on her pillows, looking at the ceiling, her chest heaving. She reached for the phone again. She dialed a number she had not called in months. I was at my desk at Northgate, staring at a spreadsheet. When my cell phone buzzed, I looked at the ID. Grandma. I answered, whispering so my supervisor wouldn't hear. Grandma. Oh my God. Are you okay? Mom said you were too sick to talk. Violet? Evelyn's voice was raspy, like dry leaves on pavement. Listen to me very carefully. Are you alone? I am at work. Go to the bathroom, she commanded. Now. I ran to the break room bathroom and locked the door. I am here. I need you to tell me exactly what you signed, she said. Every paper, every date. Do not leave anything out. I signed a power of attorney, I stammered. Dad said it was for liability. They said the business was failing. They said they were saving me. Failing. Evelyn let out a short, harsh laugh. My dear, the business had a 20% profit margin last quarter. They are not saving you. They are erasing you. My knees gave out. I slid down the tiled wall until I hit the floor. What do? I cried silently, tears streaming down my face. Dry your eyes, Evelyn snapped. You are a Parker. We do not cry when we are robbed. We sharpen the knives. I am going to give you the name of a lawyer. His name is Callahan. He is the only man in this city I trust. You go to him tonight. You tell him everything. And Violet. Yes. Do not let them know you know, she hissed. Play the fool. Play the victim. Let them get comfortable. Because when we pull the rug out, I want them to break their necks. The phone call that turned suspicion into war came on a Tuesday, 2 weeks before Christmas. I was sitting on the floor of my grandmother's private room at the rehabilitation center, cross-referencing a stack of heavily redacted bank statements that Mr. Callahan, the lawyer Evelyn had recommended, had managed to subpoena. The room smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Evelyn was sitting in her armchair by the window, watching the snow fall. Her face pale, but her eyes burning with a clarity that had terrified my father since he was a boy. Her personal cell phone buzzed. She picked it up, expecting another update from Callahan. Instead, it was Arthur Penhaligon, a man who owned one of the largest food distribution networks in the state. "Evelyn," his voice boomed, loud enough that I could hear it from where I sat. "I just wanted to reach out before the holidays, and, of course, to offer my congratulations." Evelyn frowned, her grip on the phone tightening. "Congratulations. Arthur, I am an old woman recovering from a stroke. Unless you are congratulating me on surviving the hospital food, I am not sure what you mean." "On the sale. Evelyn, the Hale deal." Arthur laughed, a sound like gravel in a mixer. "I just got off the golf course with Grant Hale. He is strutting around like a peacock, telling everyone he finally acquired the Parker cold chain assets. He says the deal is effectively done. He is calling himself the new owner." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the heating vent. "Grant Hale," Evelyn repeated, the name tasting like poison. Grant Hale was a corporate raider, a man known for buying family businesses, stripping them of their assets, firing the loyal staff, and selling the skeletal remains for a profit. He was a butcher. "He said the papers are with legal," Arthur continued, oblivious to the bomb he had just dropped. "He mentioned your son, Warren, and that grandson of yours were very accommodating with the terms." "I see," Evelyn said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. "Arthur, you will have to excuse me. I need to make a call." She hung up and looked at me. "They are not just stealing it, Violet. They are selling it for scrap. They are handing my life's work to a vulture." That was the moment the sadness ended and the rage began. 2 days later, the invitation arrived. It was a text message from Darla. "We are having a family dinner for Christmas Eve. Just us. We want to put all the unpleasantness behind us. Please come. Violet, it would mean so much to your father. It was the first time I had been invited to the main house in 2 years." "It is a trap," I told Evelyn, showing her the phone. "Of course it is a trap," she replied, buttoning her coat. She had checked herself out of the rehab facility that morning against medical advice. "They need you in the room. Grant Hale is not a man who buys a car without the title. They need one last signature from you. Or they need to bully you into silence while they finalize the transfer. They think I am a vegetable, and you are a doormat. So we don't go." "On the contrary," Evelyn said, applying a layer of dark red lipstick. "We go, and we burn the house down." We arrived at the house at 7 o'clock. The scene was perfectly staged, a Norman Rockwell painting designed to conceal a crime scene. The fire was crackling. The tree was laden with ornaments, and the smell of roasting goose filled the air. When I walked in, pushing Evelyn's wheelchair, she insisted on the chair not because she needed it, but because it made her look frail and harmless. The tension in the room spiked instantly. "Mother," Warren said, his smile faltering as he saw Evelyn, "we did not know you were up to visiting. The doctor said—" "The doctors are pessimists," Evelyn said sharply, "and I would not miss a family Christmas. Push me to the table. Violet." Darla recovered quickly, rushing forward to kiss the air next to my cheek. "Violet, darling, you look well, tired, but well." "I have been working double shifts," I said, keeping my voice soft, playing the role they expected, the beaten dog. We sat at the dining table. It was the same table where, years later, I would drop the $80 million bomb, but on this night, the power dynamic was reversed. They held the cards, or so they thought. The dinner started with the usual pleasantries, but the air was thick with unsaid words. Mason was drinking heavily, his eyes darting between me and a thick leather portfolio sitting on the sideboard. "So, Violet," Mason said, stabbing a potato, "how is the job hunt? Mom said you were having some bad luck." This was my cue. I looked down at my plate. "I do not understand it," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I have had 10 interviews, great interviews, I am qualified. I am eager, but every time, right before the offer, they pull back. One hiring manager told me my background check was flagged for instability. I looked up at Darla. Mom, do you think there is something wrong with me? Am I unhireable? Darla sighed. A performance of maternal pity. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Oh, Violet, it is not your fault. The world is a hard place. Some people just are not cut out for the corporate ladder. You are fragile. You always have been. It is the market, Mason interjected quickly, glancing at Warren. And let's be honest, Vi, your resume is thin. Northgate is a dead end. Employers see that and they assume you lack ambition. It is not a conspiracy. It is just reality. But instability, I pressed. Who would say that I have never been fired? I have never been arrested. Mistakes happen, Warren said, wiping his mouth. HR departments are messy. Look, honey, maybe this is a sign. Maybe you should stop fighting so hard. You are young. You should not be stressing about careers and background checks. Your father is right, Darla said, her voice dropping to that silky, manipulative tone I knew so well. We just want you to be safe, Violet. We hate seeing you struggle like this, living in that awful apartment, counting pennies. It breaks my heart. Does it? Evelyn spoke up. She had been silent until now, picking at her food. Of course it does. Mother, Darla snapped. She is my daughter. Then why? Evelyn asked, her eyes locking onto Mason. Did I find a draft of an email on the family server sent to the HR director of Peterson Logistics, where Violet interviewed last month, claiming she had a history of substance abuse? The silence that followed was instantaneous and absolute. Mason choked on his wine. What? That is ridiculous. I never sent such a thing. I did not say you sent it, Evelyn said calmly. I said I found a draft. But since you brought it up, the timestamps on Violet's rejection letters match the login times on your laptop quite perfectly. Mother, you are confused, Warren said, his face flushing red. You have been ill. You are imagining things. Am I? Evelyn smiled, a cold, shark-like expression. Violet, ask them. I looked at my parents. I looked at the brother who had mocked me my entire life. I let the mask of the scared little girl slip, just an inch. If all of this, I gestured to the house, the food, the documents on the sideboard. If all of this is about protecting me, why did I not know I had something that needed protecting? We told you, Mason said, his voice rising. The liability, the risks. No, I said. I am talking about the asset, the company, Grandma's company. You told me it was failing. You told me it was a burden. But I did some reading. Logistics companies in the Midwest are trading at 12 times their earnings right now. Grant Hale does not buy failing companies. Mason, he buys gold mines. Mason froze. The name Grant Hale hit him like a physical blow. Who told you that name? Darla hissed, turning on me. Does it matter? I asked. Is it true? Are you selling VP Logistics to Grant Hale? It is a complex merger, Warren shouted, slamming his hand on the table. You do not understand the high-level finance, Violet. We are doing this to salvage what we can before the market crashes. We are trying to get you a payout so you can live a normal life. A payout, Evelyn asked, or a cleanup? Evelyn reached into her purse. She pulled out a single, folded sheet of paper. Open the file, Mason, she commanded, pointing to the leather portfolio on the sideboard. I will not, Mason said, standing up. This is my house. You cannot come in here and interrogate us. Open the file, I said, standing up to face him. Or I call Grant Hale right now and tell him that the title he is about to buy is contested. Mason hesitated. He looked at Warren. Warren looked at his Scotch glass, defeated. Mason walked to the sideboard and threw the portfolio onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of me. I opened it. Inside were the transfer documents. I flipped through them, my heart pounding in my throat. Sale agreement, VP. Logistics to Hale Holdings. Purchase price. $22 million. $22 million. The company was worth easily 4 times that. They were selling it for a fraction of its value. Why I turned the page, and there it was. Consulting fee. $5 million. Payable to Mason Parker. Retention bonus. $3 million. Payable to Warren Parker. Real estate transfer. The Parker Family Trust controlled by Darla Parker to retain ownership of the warehouse land. Leasing it back to Hale at triple the market rate. They were gutting the company. They were selling the business, my business, for a quick cash injection for themselves, while leaving me with a tax bill and a payout that would barely cover my student loans. They were stealing the future Evelyn had built for me and chopping it up into immediate gratification for themselves. $22 million, I whispered. You are selling a legacy for $22 million. And you are taking $8 million of it in under-the-table fees. We have expenses, Darla cried out. Abandoning the Caring Mother Act, this house costs a fortune to run. Your father's pension is gone. Mason has debts. We are a family, Violet. We share. You do not share, I said, looking at the papers. You steal. You have been gaslighting me for 2 years. You sabotaged my job interviews so I would be desperate enough to sign whatever you put in front of me. You kept me poor so I would be grateful for the crumbs. You are ungrateful, Mason spat. You did nothing to earn this company. Grandma gave it to you on a whim. I am the one who has been dealing with the lawyers. I am the one who went to business school. It should have been mine. And there it is, Evelyn said softly. She looked at me. You see them now. Violet, do you see them clearly? Yes, I said. I see them. Good. Evelyn pulled her phone out. She dialed a number and put it on speaker. Mr. Callahan, she said. I am here. Mrs. Parker. The lawyer's voice came through, crisp and professional. Did you hear all of that? Every word, Callahan said. I have the recording, and I have the draft of the injunction ready to file. The sale to Grant Hale is dead in the water. I will have a restraining order against Mason and Warren regarding any company assets on the judge's desk by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Warren went white. Mother, you cannot do this. This deal we have already spent the advance. If this deal falls through, we are ruined. Hale will sue us for breach of contract. Then I suggest you find a good lawyer, Evelyn said. Because the one on the phone works for Violet now. Darla looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. Violet, please, talk to her. We made a mistake. We were desperate. Do not let them destroy us. I looked at the woman who had ignored my birthday for 4 years. I looked at the man who had called me unstable to strangers. I looked at the brother who had tried to sell my future for a consulting fee. You wanted me to be safe, I said, closing the portfolio. I think taking my business back is the safest thing I can do. I picked up the portfolio. It was heavy. Merry Christmas, I said. I wheeled Evelyn out of the room, leaving them sitting in the wreckage of their own greed. The silence they had used as a weapon against me for years was now hanging over them, heavy and suffocating, but the war was not over. As we stepped out into the cold night air, I knew that stopping the sale was just the beginning. They had tried to bury me. Now, I was going to make them pay for the shovel. The silence in the dining room was broken not by an apology, but by the doorbell. It was a sharp, intrusive sound that made my father flinch. We were standing in the wreckage of the conversation, the accusations hanging in the air like smoke. My mother, Darla, was wiping her eyes with a napkin, her face a mask of victimhood. Mason was staring at the floor, his jaw tight. Who on earth is that? Darla asked, her voice trembling. It is Christmas Eve. I believe that is my guest, Evelyn said. She did not look at the door. She looked at her watch. He is right on time. I went to the door. Standing on the porch, shaking snow off a cashmere overcoat, was a man I had only met once before, briefly, at a charity gala years ago, Tobias Callahan. He was Evelyn's personal attorney, a man whose reputation in Chicago legal circles was somewhere between a brilliant scholar and a great white shark. He was 70 years old, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human greed. He was holding a thick black accordion file. "Good evening, Miss Parker," he said to me, his voice gravelly and calm. "I apologize for the intrusion on the holiday. Your grandmother insisted the matter was urgent." "Come in, Mr. Callahan," I said, stepping aside. When we walked into the dining room, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Warren stood up, his face draining of color. "Tobias," Warren stammered, "what are you doing here?" "Working, Warren," Callahan said. He did not offer to shake hands. He walked to the end of the table, cleared a space among the crystal wine glasses and the half-eaten turkey, and set the black file down. The thud was heavy, solid. It sounded like a gavel. "I think we should all sit down," Evelyn said from her wheelchair. "Mr. Callahan has brought some reading material." "This is ridiculous," Darla snapped, her fear turning into defensive anger. "We are in the middle of a family dinner. You cannot just bring a lawyer into my house and start whatever this is." "I am afraid the time for dinner conversation is over. Mrs. Parker," Callahan said. He opened the file. The sound of the latch clicking was sharp. "We are now discussing felonies. Specifically, fraud, forgery, and identity theft." He pulled out a stack of documents and slid the top one across the polished mahogany table toward me. "Violet," Callahan said, "take a look at this. Do you recognize this document?" I picked it up. It was a general power of attorney, dated 14 months ago. It granted Mason Parker full authority to act on my behalf regarding all assets held in the VP Logistics Trust. I looked at the bottom of the page. There, in blue ink, was my signature. Violet E. Parker. It looked perfect. The loop of the V, the sharp cross of the T. It was my hand. I stared at it, a cold feeling spreading through my stomach. For a second, I doubted myself. Had I signed this? Had I been so tired, so beaten down during those months of poverty that I had just signed what they put in front of me without looking? "It looks like my signature." I whispered. "Look closer," Callahan said. He pulled a small magnifying glass from his pocket and slid it over. "Look at the pressure points on the upstroke of the P, and look at the dot over the I." I leaned in, under the magnification. The truth revealed itself. My signature was usually fluid, a single continuous motion. This signature, however, had tiny, microscopic hesitations. The ink pooled slightly at the curves, indicating the pen had paused. The dot over the I was a perfect circle, carefully drawn. I never drew circles. I slashed a dot. "It is a tracing," Callahan said, answering the question before I asked it. "A very good one. Likely done using a backlight and a high-quality sample." But the writer hesitated. "The pen pressure is uniform throughout. When you sign your name, Violet, you press hard on the downstrokes and light on the upstrokes. This was drawn, not written." Mason shifted in his chair. "That proves nothing. People's signatures change when they are stressed. Violet was under a lot of pressure." "Perhaps," Callahan said, pulling another sheet from the file. "But physics is rarely stressed. Let us look at the date. October 14th. This document was notarized by a friend of yours, I assume. Mason on October 14th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in downtown Chicago." Callahan looked at me. "Violet, where were you on October 14th?" I closed my eyes. Thinking back, October. The leaves were turning. I was desperate for work. I had driven my car, my car had broken down. I had taken the bus. "I was in Milwaukee," I said, my eyes snapping open. "I had a final round interview for a supply chain manager position at a brewery. The bus broke down on the way back. I did not get back to Chicago until after 9 that night. I have the bus ticket receipt in my email." "Exactly," Callahan said. "We have the geolocation data from your phone as well, which puts you 100 miles away at the exact moment you were allegedly sitting in a notary's office in Chicago, signing away your company." He looked at Mason. Mason did not look back. He was staring at a candle flame, his face pale. "Forgery is a Class 3 felony in Illinois," Callahan stated dryly, "but we are just getting started." He reached into the file again. This time, he pulled out a stack of emails. They were printouts, thick with metadata headers. "You mentioned earlier that you were having trouble finding employment," Callahan said to me. "That you were being flagged for instability. We had our forensic team run a trace on the communications received by the HR departments of the last 5 companies you interviewed with." He fanned the papers out on the table. "Anonymous tips," Callahan said. "Sent from a generic Gmail account, Concerned Observer 88 warning potential employers that Violet Parker was litigious, had a history of theft, and was currently under investigation for embezzlement at her previous job." I picked up one of the emails. Reading the words made my stomach turn. "She puts on a good face, but she is a liability. Do not let her near your accounts." The malice was palpable. It wasn't just business. It was personal. It was designed to destroy my reputation so thoroughly that I would have no choice but to crawl back to my family. "We traced the IP address," Callahan said. "It resolves to a residential Comcast account." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "This house," he finished. "Specifically, the router located in the second-floor home office." I looked up. "Who wrote them?" I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. Mason was the tech-savvy one. He was the one who knew how to hide things. But as I asked the question, Mason did not look at the table. He did not look at Callahan. He looked at Darla. It was a quick, involuntary glance, a flash of shared guilt. I turned to my mother. She was gripping her wine glass so hard I thought the stem would snap. Her face was flushed, her eyes wet. "You," I asked. "You wrote these." Darla slammed her glass down. Wine sloshed onto the tablecloth. "Don't you look at me like that," she cried out. "I did what I had to do. You were going to leave. Violet. You were going to take that job in Milwaukee or wherever and disappear. You are not strong enough to be out there alone. You needed to be here, with us, where we could manage things." Manage things. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You destroyed my life so you could keep me as a pet. You ruined my career so I would stay broke and dependent. Don't turn Christmas into a court, Violet," Darla shouted, standing up to meet me. "We are your family. Everything we did to keep this family together, to keep the roof over our heads. You have no idea the pressure we have been under." "Sit down, Darla," Evelyn said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the shouting like a razor. Darla looked at Evelyn, then slowly sank back into her chair, sobbing into her hands. Warren cleared his throat. He looked aged, defeated. He tried to straighten his tie, a futile attempt to regain some dignity. "It was the crash," Warren said, his voice raspy. "The investments I made, they went bad. Violet, all of them. The pension, the savings. We were leveraged to the hilt. The bank was threatening foreclosure on the house. We needed liquidity. We needed it fast." He gestured to the papers on the table. "We were just trying to keep everything from collapsing," he pleaded. "If we sold the logistics company, we could pay off the debts. We could secure Mason's future. We could set up a trust for you, a smaller one. Yes, but safe. We were not stealing from you. We were reallocating resources to save the family." "You were robbing Peter to pay Paul," Callahan corrected. "And Peter did not know he was being robbed. We would have paid her back," Mason insisted. "Once the deal with Hale went through, and the consulting fees came in, we would have made it right." Eventually, I repeated. "Just like you were eventually going to tell me I owned a company, just like you were eventually going to stop sabotaging my life." Evelyn leaned forward. She looked at her son, Warren, with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Protection," Evelyn said, "does not require breaking her legs so she cannot walk away. You were not protecting her future. Warren, you were eating it. We had a deal on the table." Warren slammed his fist on the table, the desperation finally breaking through. "Grant Hale was ready to wire the money next week. $22 million. It solves everything. If you blow this up now, with these lawsuits, Hale will walk. We get nothing. The house gets foreclosed. Is that what you want? You want your parents on the street." Callahan cleared his throat. "Actually, regarding Mr. Hale." He reached into the back of the file folder. He pulled out one final document. It was a single sheet, a filing with the Secretary of State, dated just 3 days prior. "We ran a search on the corporate filings for the shell company Mason set up to facilitate the transfer," Callahan said. "It seems you were anxious to close the deal. You wanted to show Hale you were serious." He placed the document in the center of the table. "Turn it over," Callahan said. I reached out and flipped the paper. It was a transfer of control filing. In the section marked Primary Owner, Beneficiary, my name was gone. It had been crossed out in the previous amendment. In its place was a new name, Grant Hale. "You already transferred it," I said, the blood draining from my face. "You did not just negotiate. You signed the deed over. You gave him the company before the money even hit the bank." The room went dead silent. Mason looked at the document, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. No, that is a draft. That was held in escrow. It was not supposed to be filed until the wire transfer was confirmed." "Well," Callahan said, "it seems Mr. Hale decided to file it early. Legally speaking, as of 72 hours ago, Grant Hale owns VP Logistics. He has the title. You have nothing." Warren stared at the paper. He stole it." "He is a shark. Warren," Evelyn said, "you tried to swim with him, and you got eaten. You gave him the keys to the house and asked him to wait outside. Why is anyone surprised he walked in?" "So it is gone," Darla whispered. "The money, the company, it is all gone." "For you, yes," Callahan said. "For Violet, that depends on what happens in the next 5 minutes. I looked at my family. They were not masterminds. They were amateurs. They were desperate. Greedy amateurs who had been outplayed by a professional predator because they were too arrogant to realize they were the prey. They had sold me out for a check that was never going to come." "What happens in the next 5 minutes?" Mason asked, his voice shaking. Callahan looked at me. "We can file the injunction. We can prove the signature is a forgery. We can prove the transfer to Hale is void because it was based on a fraudulent power of attorney. We can unwind the whole thing, but it will be public. It will be messy, and the criminal charges against the 3 of you for forgery and fraud will be part of the public record." He paused. "Or," Callahan continued, "Violet can choose a different path." All 3 of them looked at me. Their eyes were wide, terrified. The arrogance was gone. The parental authority was gone. They were looking at me like I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. "What do you want, Violet?" Warren asked. "Please, we are your parents." I looked at the forged signature. I looked at the hateful emails. I looked at the transfer of control that had nearly left me with nothing. "I want the truth," I said. "And then I want everything back." The document lay on the table like a dead body. The name Grant Hale was printed in bold, undeniable typeface, staring up at us. It was proof that my family hadn't just planned to betray me. They had already pulled the trigger. "It is a mistake," Darla said. Her voice was high and brittle, like glass about to shatter. She reached out as if to snatch the paper back, but Mr. Callahan placed a heavy hand over it. "It is a clerical error. You know how these legal forms are. They are impossible to understand. It is probably just a tax designation, an LLC placeholder." "A placeholder," Callahan repeated, his tone devoid of amusement. "Mrs. Parker, this is a transfer of control filing with the Secretary of State. It does not designate taxes. It designates ownership. As of right now, legally speaking, your daughter does not own her company. A predator named Grant Hale does." "No," Darla insisted, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "We were just updating the corporate structure, Warren. Tell them it was just for the audit trail." Warren opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the document, then at me, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before, absolute terror. He wasn't scared of the police, he was scared of the silence. "It is not an audit trail, Darla," I said, my voice quiet. "It is a sale. You sold it, past tense." "We did not sell it," she shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. The wine glasses jumped. "We secured it. We moved the asset to a safe harbor. Grant is a partner. He is holding it in trust until you are ready." "Ready for what?" I asked. "Ready to stop being unstable. Ready to be the daughter you wanted." "Yes." She was breathing hard, her chest heaving beneath the red velvet of her dress. "You do not understand finance, Violet. You never have." We had to move fast. The market was volatile. We had to use the power of attorney to protect the equity before it evaporated. "The power of attorney that you forged," Callahan interjected smoothly. "It was not forged," Mason yelled. He was sweating now, rivulets running down his temples. "I had verbal authorization. Violet told me last Thanksgiving that she wanted me to handle things, implied consent." Evelyn, who had been watching the scene with the detached interest of a judge at a murder trial, finally spoke. She turned her wheelchair slightly to face her grandson. "Mason," she said. Her voice was low, but it carried a weight that silenced the room instantly. "Look at me." Mason swallowed hard. He looked at his grandmother. "Did you sign that paper?" Evelyn asked. "Did you physically take a pen, trace your sister's name, and lie to a notary?" "I," Mason stammered. He looked at Darla. Darla nodded imperceptibly. A command to hold the line. "I signed on her behalf," Mason said, his voice shaking. "Because Mom said we had to. She said Violet was having a breakdown. She said if we didn't act, the creditors would take everything." "Which creditors?" I asked. "The company has zero debt. I checked the books. Mason, we are cash flow positive." "The personal creditors," Warren blurted out. The room froze. Warren realized his mistake immediately. He clapped a hand over his mouth, but the words were out. "Personal creditors?" I asked, leaning forward. "Dad, whose creditors? Yours." "It is complicated," Warren mumbled, staring at his plate. "The house, the refinance look, it is all family money. Violet, it all goes into the same pot eventually. We were just trying to keep the ship afloat." "So you stole my company to pay off your mortgage?" I asked. "We did not steal it," Darla cried. "We leveraged it. There is a difference." "There is no difference in prison," Callahan said. That word prison hung in the air. And then, from the far end of the table, a new voice spoke up, a voice that was usually soft, usually compliant, usually invisible. "You said she knew." We all turned. Kendra, Mason's wife, was sitting with her hands folded in her lap. She was pale, her eyes wide with a dawning realization that was horrific to witness. She looked from Mason to me, and then back to Mason. "Kendra, honey, not now," Mason said, reaching for her hand. She pulled her hand away as if he were radioactive. "You told me she knew," Kendra repeated, her voice gaining strength. "Last month, when you brought home that bonus check, the $50,000, you told me Violet had approved the consulting deal. You said she was happy to let you run things because she was sick." "She is sick," Mason said desperately. "Look at her. She is trying to send her own family to jail on Christmas." "But she did not sign it," Kendra said. She looked at me, and I saw an apology in her eyes. "Violet, I didn't know. I swear, Mason told me you were in a clinic. He said the papers were signed before you went in." "I was never in a clinic, Kendra," I said gently. "I was at work. I was in my apartment." "I know," Kendra whispered. "I know because I saw the emails." "Kendra, shut up," Darla hissed. "This does not concern you. This is family business." "I am family," Kendra snapped, turning on her mother-in-law. "And I am not going to let you drag me into a fraud charge. I have a son to think about." She turned to Callahan. "The laptop," she said rapidly, the words spilling out like a confession. "Mason's laptop. The silver MacBook. It is in the study right now. I saw them. The drafts. The emails to the recruiters. And the practice sheets. Practice sheets? Callahan asked, raising an eyebrow. Sheets of paper, Kendra said, tears beginning to spill down her cheeks. Dozens of them. Mason was practicing Violet's signature. He sat at the kitchen table for 3 nights, tracing it over and over again from an old birthday card she sent us. He joked about it. He said he was perfecting the brand. Mason closed his eyes. He looked like a man who had just been shot. "You idiot," Darla whispered to her son. "You let her see—" "I didn't think she would snitch," Mason shouted, finally snapping. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "I did what you told me to do, Mom. You said, fix it. You said, Violet is ungrateful. She doesn't deserve it. Take it back. You handed me the pen. You stood over me while I traced it." "I did no such thing," Darla gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "I am a mother. I would never tell my children to commit a crime." "You tell us to do everything else," Mason screamed. His face was purple. "You told me to buy the car I couldn't afford to impress the neighbors. You told Dad to invest in that stupid condo development that went bust. You drive this whole family off a cliff, and then you blame us when we crash." "Mason," Warren shouted, "do not speak to your mother that way." "Oh, shut up." "Dad," Mason yelled, "you are just as bad. You knew. You drove me to the notary. You waited in the car because you were too scared to come in. But you knew exactly what I was doing inside." "I was protecting the family," Warren roared, slamming his fist down again. "We were drowning. Do you have any idea how much debt we are in? 3 mortgages, maxed out credit cards. I have not slept through the night in 5 years. We needed that sale." "So you cannibalized your daughter," Evelyn said. Her voice cut through the shouting match like a blade. The 3 of them, Darla, Warren. Mason stopped panting and looked at the old woman at the head of the table. "You failed," Evelyn said. "You failed in your careers. You failed in your investments. And instead of tightening your belts, instead of admitting you were mediocre, you decided to feast on the only person in this room who actually knows how to work." "We did it for her," Darla sobbed. The tears were flowing freely now, but they felt calculated, a last-ditch attempt to garner sympathy. "We were going to set up a trust. We were going to make sure she never had to work in that horrible warehouse again, Violet. Honey, please, look at me. I am your mother. I carried you. I raised you. I only ever wanted you to be safe." I looked at her, really looked at her. For years, that look of tearful concern had been my kryptonite. It had made me doubt my own reality. It had made me feel guilty for existing. But tonight, the spell was broken. "Safe?" I asked. "You sabotaged 5 job interviews. Mom, 5. You wanted me unemployed. You wanted me desperate. That is not safety. That is captivity. I just wanted you close." She wept. "I missed you." "You missed the control," I said. "And you missed the money." "Violet, be reasonable," Warren pleaded. He was wiping sweat from his forehead with a napkin. "If Callahan files those papers, if the police get involved, it is over. Mason will lose his license. I will be disbarred from the board. Your mother, the scandal, will kill her. We can fix this. We can call Grant Hale. We can unwind the deal quietly. Just give us a chance." "A chance?" I asked. "Like the chance you gave me when you intercepted my bank statements. Like the chance you gave me when you told everyone I was a drug addict." "We never said drug addict," Mason protested weakly. "Substance abuse," I corrected. "Same thing to an employer." I picked up my wine glass. My hand was steady. "I have a question," I said. "Just one. If the sale to Grant Hale went through, if the $22 million hit the account, how much were you planning to give me?" They looked at each other. The hesitation told me everything. 10%. I guessed. 5. "We were going to manage it for you," Darla said softly. "We were going to give you an allowance, $2,000 a month, to keep you grounded. $2,000 from a $22 million sale." I laughed. It was a cold sound. You were going to steal 99% of my inheritance, I said, and you were going to make me thank you for the 1%. It is not stealing if we are family, Darla shrieked, her mask finally slipping completely. Her face twisted into an ugly snarl. It is ours, we deserve it. We sacrificed everything for you, you ungrateful little brat. You think you are so smart with your lawyer and your briefcase, you are nothing. You are just a clerk. You need us. She does not need you, Evelyn said. She never did. The room fell silent again, save for Darla's ragged breathing. Evelyn looked at the antique grandfather clock in the corner of the room. It chimed the half-hour. Dong, dong. You asked why we needed a script if the truth was simple. Evelyn said to the room, the answer is that lies are heavy. You have to carry them everywhere. And tonight, you drop them. She turned to Callahan. Tobias. Everything is ready. Evelyn, Callahan said. Ready, Warren asked, his voice trembling. Ready for what? Evelyn looked at her watch again. She smoothed the napkin on her lap. I did not just invite Mr. Callahan tonight, she said calmly. I knew you would deny it. I knew you would lie. I knew you would try to gaslight Violet one last time. So I thought it would be best to have independent verification. Verification? Mason asked. He looked at the window. Who is coming? Not who is coming, Evelyn corrected. Who is already here? She pointed a manicured finger toward the foyer. They have been listening for the last 20 minutes, Evelyn said. I believe the term is probable cause. What? Darla whispered. Hush now, Evelyn said, closing her eyes briefly as if savoring the moment. They are stepping onto the porch. Who? Warren shouted. The outcome of your actions, Evelyn said. As she spoke, the heavy oak front door which I had left unlocked when I let Callahan in swung open. The cold wind rushed into the house, extinguishing the candles on the table. In the sudden gloom, figures appeared in the hallway. Evelyn looked at Darla, whose face was a portrait of absolute ruin. They are here, Evelyn said. The two men who stepped into the hallway did not look like the police officers you see on television. They were not wearing uniforms, and they did not have their hands on their holsters. They were dressed in charcoal wool coats and suits that were ill-fitting in the shoulders, the kind of clothes worn by men who spend their lives looking at spreadsheets and bank records rather than chasing criminals down alleyways. They were from the Economic Crimes Unit. Mr. Callahan, the taller of the two, asked. Stepping into the dining room, he flashed a badge that caught the reflection of the chandelier. I am Detective Miller. This is Detective Saunders. We received your call regarding the active fraud in progress. The room felt suddenly very small. The air, which had been hot with shouting just moments ago, turned frigid. My father, Warren, sank back into his chair, his face the color of old ash. Mason stood frozen near the sideboard, his hand hovering near the laptop as if he wanted to slam it shut but knew that the motion alone would look like an admission of guilt. Thank you for coming, detectives, Mr. Callahan said, stepping forward smoothly. He did not look like a man ruining a family Christmas. He looked like a surgeon preparing to cut out a tumor. I have the documentation here, the forged power of attorney, the fraudulent transfer of control filing, and the sworn affidavit from the witness regarding the practice signatures. Detective Miller nodded and walked to the table. He did not look at my parents. He looked at the papers. He pulled out a small digital camera and snapped a photo of the documents spread across the mahogany surface. The flash was blindingly bright, a harsh white strobe that made the holiday decorations look garish and fake. We are going to need to collect all of this, Miller said, his voice flat. And we will need to secure the electronic devices mentioned in the report. Is that the laptop? He pointed to the silver MacBook on the sideboard, the machine Kendra had identified as the forgery station. That is my personal computer. Mason stammered. His voice was thin, reedy. You cannot just take it. I have client privilege. I am a consultant. We have a warrant. Mr. Parker, Detective Saunders said. pulling a folded paper from his inside pocket. Signed by Judge Harrison about an hour ago, it covers the seizure of all electronic devices and physical documents related to VIP, logistics, and the unauthorized sale of assets. Saunders walked over, picked up the laptop, and placed it into a clear evidence bag. He sealed it with a strip of red tape. The sound of the tape ripping off the roll was loud, violent, and final. Darla made a noise in her throat, a high-pitched whimper. She looked at the detectives, then at Callahan, then at me. Her eyes were wide, darting frantically. She was losing the narrative. For 30 years, Darla Parker had controlled every story told in this house. She decided who was good, who was bad, who was successful, and who was a failure. Now, strangers were writing the ending, and she could not stand it. "Officer," Darla said, stepping forward. She put on her best country club smile, though it trembled at the edges. "Officer, really, this is a misunderstanding, a terrible family squabble. We were just having a heated discussion about legacy planning. There is no need for police. Surely we can discuss this privately. Perhaps in the kitchen I have some fresh coffee brewing." Detective Miller looked at her. He did not smile. "Ma'am, this is an investigation into a $22 million fraud. We are not here for coffee. Please step back and keep your hands visible." The rebuke hit her like a slap. Darla recoiled, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Violet," she whispered. She reached out across the table. Her fingers, usually so perfectly manicured, were shaking. She tried to grab my hand. "Violet, tell them to stop. Tell them you gave us permission. We can fix this. Just say the word, please." I looked at her hand. It was the same hand that had hung up the phone when I called for help 2 years ago. It was the same hand that had signed the checks for Mason's private tutors while I worked double shifts. I pulled my hand away. I did not jerk it back in anger. I simply withdrew it, slowly and deliberately, placing it in my lap. "I cannot tell them that. Mom," I said. My voice was calm. It scared me how calm I was. "Because it would be a lie, and I am done with lies. You are destroying us," she hissed, the tears spilling over again. "Your own flesh and blood. I am protecting my assets," I said, repeating the phrase they had used against me so many times. "I am just being practical. Isn't that what you always taught me? Be practical." Detective Saunders moved to the other side of the table. He pulled 2 envelopes from his jacket. "Warren Parker?" he asked. My father looked up, his eyes glassy. "Yes. You are being served with a summons to appear for questioning at the district attorney's office regarding your role in the falsification of corporate records and conspiracy to commit fraud." Saunders dropped the envelope on his plate, right on top of the slice of turkey. "Mason Parker." Mason didn't answer. He was staring at the evidence bag holding his laptop. Saunders dropped the second envelope in front of him. "You are also named as a primary suspect in identity theft and wire fraud," Saunders said. "Do not leave the state. Surrender your passport to the court clerk by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." Mason made a sound like a balloon deflating. He slumped into a chair, putting his head in his hands. "My license," he moaned. "The certification board, they will revoke my license as soon as the charges are filed. I am finished." "You were finished the minute you decided to trace your sister's signature," Evelyn said. She was sipping her water, watching the proceedings with a terrifying satisfaction. Warren looked at me. He looked older than I had ever seen him. The bluster, the arrogance, the patriarchal weight he usually threw around it was all gone. He looked like a frightened old man. "Violet," he said, his voice cracking. "Do you know what this means? An investigation. It will take years. The legal fees alone will bankrupt us. They will take the house. They will take my pension. Everything I worked for, everything." "You mean everything you tried to steal?" I corrected. "I am your father," he pleaded. "I changed your diapers. I taught you to ride a bike. Do you really want to see me in handcuffs? Do you want to see your mother evicted? Is your heart that cold? It was a good speech. It was designed to hit the guilt button that he had installed in my psyche when I was a child. But he had pressed that button too many times. It was broken. You were willing to let me be homeless, I said. You were willing to let me believe I was crazy. You were willing to sell my future to Grant Hale so you could keep this house. You asked if I want you to be investigated. No, Dad, I do not want it. But you left me no choice. You put me in a corner. You wanted me to be empty-handed so you could keep your hands full. Warren stammered. We would have taken care of you. No, Evelyn interrupted. You would not have. Evelyn wheeled her chair forward, cutting through the space between the detectives and the family. Since we are putting everything on the table, Evelyn said, her voice clear and sharp, there is one more piece of business. You seem to be under the impression, Warren, that if you lose the company, you still have my estate to fall back on. You think that when I die, the Parker inheritance will wash away all these debts. Mason looked up. A flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. It was pathetic. Well, Evelyn continued, smoothing her skirt, I think you should know. I visited Mr. Callahan's office 4 months ago, the same week I found the draft of that nasty email on the server. She looked at Darla. I changed my will, Evelyn said. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the detectives stopped moving for a second. I removed all of you, Evelyn said, gesturing to her son and grandson. Warren, Darla, Mason, you are no longer beneficiaries, not for the house, not for the stocks, not for the jewelry, nothing. The entire estate, 100% of it, is now placed in a trust for the sole benefit of Violet Parker. Mason looked as if he had been punched in the stomach. He gasped for air. You can't, he whispered. Grandma, that is millions. You can't just cut us out. I can, Evelyn said. And I did. You were waiting for me to die so you could get rich. Mason, I decided to make sure that my death would be as unprofitable for you as my life has been. Darla let out a scream. It wasn't a word. It was a raw sound of fury. She had lost the company. She had lost the house. And now, she had lost the safety net she had been counting on for decades. You witch! Darla shrieked at Evelyn. You spiteful old witch! You turned her against us. This is your fault. It is entirely my fault, Evelyn agreed pleasantly. I should have done it years ago. While Darla screamed, I noticed movement at the other end of the table. Kendra, Mason's wife, was quietly packing her purse. She picked up her phone and typed a long message. I saw the screen reflection in the window. She wasn't texting a friend. She was searching for Divorce Attorneys Chicago. Kendra stood up. Where are you going? Mason asked, reaching for her. I am taking the car, Kendra said. Her voice was trembling, but she didn't look back. I am going to my sister's. Do not follow me. Mason, do not bring this mess to her house. Kendra, wait. You can't leave me now, Mason cried. You committed a felony. Mason, she said, buttoning her coat. And you tried to pin it on a mental breakdown you invented for your sister. I did not sign up for this. I thought you were ambitious. I didn't know you were a criminal. She walked out the door, past the detectives, into the snow. The door slammed shut, echoing through the house. All right, Detective Miller said, breaking the tension. We have what we need for now. Mr. Parker, Mrs. Parker, do not leave the jurisdiction. We will be in touch regarding the interview schedule. The detectives picked up the evidence bags. They nodded to Callahan and walked out. When the door closed behind them, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The fear evaporated, replaced by a pure, unadulterated venom. Darla stopped crying. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara into dark streaks. She looked at me. The motherly mask was gone. The victim mask was gone. This was the real face, the face of a woman who had lost control and hated the person who took it. Are you happy? Darla spat. Her voice was low, guttural. Are you happy now you have destroyed this family? You have humiliated your father. You have chased away your brother's wife. You have burned it all down." "I didn't light the match, Mom," I said. "I just stopped you from hiding the ashes." "You are selfish," she hissed, stepping closer to me. "You always were. You think you are so special because Evelyn likes you. She is using you. She hates us. So she uses you as a weapon. You are just a tool. Violet, when she is gone, you will be alone. No one will want you. You will be the rich, lonely spinster with no family. Better alone than surrounded by thieves," I said. I picked up my briefcase. I felt lighter than I had in years. The heavy secret I had carried into this house, the knowledge of their betrayal, was out in the open. The weight was off my shoulders and onto theirs. "Get out," Warren whispered. He was staring at the table, refusing to look at me. "Get out of my house. It is not your house anymore." "Dad," I said softly. "The bank will likely call the note once the investigation goes public. But yes, I am leaving." I walked over to Evelyn's wheelchair. "Ready, Grandma?" "More than ready," Evelyn said. We moved toward the door. I paused at the threshold and looked back at them one last time. They sat around the ruin of their Christmas dinner, the cold turkey, the spilled wine, the empty chairs. The holiday music was still playing softly. Joy to the world. They looked small. They looked pathetic. But as I looked at Mason's clenched fists and the pure hatred in Darla's eyes, I knew this wasn't the end. They wouldn't go quietly. They would fight the charges. They would try to smear my name in the press. They would try to break the will. The dinner was over. The trap had been sprung. But the war had just entered its bloodiest phase. "Let's go," I said to Evelyn. We walked out into the snow, leaving the warmth of the lies behind us, stepping into the cold, clean air of the truth. If you watch movies about the legal system, you are conditioned to believe that justice is a singular, explosive moment. You expect a judge to bang a gavel, a jury to gasp, and the bad guys to be dragged away in handcuffs while the hero walks into the sunset. But in the real world, justice is not a sprint. It is a marathon run through waist-deep mud. It is not loud. It is the quiet, scratching sound of a stenographer's machine and the rustle of thousands of pages of discovery. The winter turned into a gray, slushy spring, and my life became a series of conference rooms that all smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. The criminal investigation was one beast, moving slowly and terrifyingly in the background. But the civil litigation was the daily grind. We were fighting on two fronts, trying to claw back the assets from Grant Hale and trying to force my family to account for the funds they had already misappropriated. Mr. Callahan was a general in this war, but even generals cannot change the terrain. The terrain, unfortunately, favored the man with the deepest pockets, and that was Grant Hale. Hale's legal team was a phalanx of suits from New York. Their strategy was simple and brutal. They argued that Hale was a bona fide purchaser for value. They claimed he had bought VTP, logistics in good faith, believing Mason and Warren had the legal authority to sell. They argued that if there was fraud, it was an internal family matter, and Hale should not be punished for my family's deceit. He had paid the money. He had the title. It was an infuriating argument, mostly because legally, it held water. "We can fight him," Callahan told me one rainy afternoon in April. We were sitting in his office, surrounded by boxes of evidence. "We can drag this out for 5 years. We can depose every employee Hale has. But Violet, look at the math. The legal fees will eat the value of the company before we even get to trial. Hale knows this. He is betting you will blink first." I looked at the spreadsheet. He was right. Fighting for the total return of the company would leave me bankrupt and bitter. "What is the offer?" I asked. "He keeps the infrastructure," Callahan said. "The warehouses, the client contracts, the trucks, but he acknowledges the irregularity of the sale. He pays a settlement to clear the title. It is not the $22 million your father agreed to. It is less, but it is cash, and it is immediate." I felt a surge of nausea. My grandmother's legacy, the company she built to be my shield, was going to be chopped up and absorbed into Hale's empire. But I also looked at the other side of the ledger. I saw my parents. I saw Mason. And the family, I asked. If you settle with Hale, Callahan said. We turn the full force of the civil recovery against Warren and Mason. We garnish them. We liquidate them. We take everything they have to make up the difference. I picked up the pen. Settlement, I said. I want the cash, and then I want to collect from them. The settlement was substantial, but it was not a fortune. After paying the legal fees, the taxes, and the forensic accountants, I walked away with about $2 million. It was a lot of money to a girl who had been eating ramen 6 months ago, but it was a fraction of what the company was worth. It felt like a defeat, but the real victory was found in the transcripts of the depositions. I sat across from Warren in a windowless room for 6 hours while Callahan peeled his life apart layer by layer. My father looked 10 years older. His skin was gray, and his hands shook constantly. He had to admit, on the record, that he had used the initial deposit from Hale to pay off personal gambling debts and the mortgage on the house. He had to admit that he had lied to the bank about his solvency. The fallout was slow and agonizing. The district attorney, armed with the evidence we provided, cut a deal. To avoid a lengthy prison sentence for grand larceny, Warren pleaded no contest to lesser charges of fraud and financial mismanagement. He avoided a jail cell, but he did not avoid the ruin. The Bar Association stripped him of his legal standing. The country club, hearing of the plea deal, revoked his membership to avoid the scandal. His friends, the men he played golf with, the men he tried so hard to impress, vanished. Warren Parker became a pariah. He spent his days sitting in a rented apartment, staring at the television, muttering about how ungrateful the world was. Mason fared worse. The licensing board for his consultancy certification was merciless, with the proof of the forged signature and the misuse of the notary seal. Mason was permanently barred from practicing as a financial fiduciary. His career was over before it had really begun, but the financial penalty was the true guillotine. The court ordered restitution. Since Mason had spent his consulting fee on a luxury car and a down payment on a condo he couldn't afford, the court seized it all. The Porsche was towed away on a flatbed truck while his neighbors watched. The condo was foreclosed, and then there was Kendra. I saw her only once during the proceedings, in the hallway of the courthouse. She looked tired, but she stood straight. She wasn't leaving Mason because he was broke. She was leaving him because she had finally seen the man behind the mask. I could have handled the debt, Violet, she told me, her voice low. I could have handled the struggle, but when I heard him on that recording, when I heard him practicing your signature and laughing about it, I realized he would do that to anyone. He would do it to me. He would do it to our son. I cannot sleep next to a man who thinks betrayal is a business strategy. She filed for divorce. She asked for nothing but full custody, and given Mason's legal state, she got it. Mason was left alone in a studio apartment that smelled of mildew, working an entry-level sales job at a used electronics store, the only place that would hire him with his record. Finally, there was Darla. The house had to go. The settlement with Hale didn't cover all the misappropriated funds, and the court placed a lien on the family estate to pay back what Warren and Mason had stolen from the trust. I parked my car across the street on the day of the auction. It was a humid day in June. The front lawn, usually manicured to perfection, was overgrown. A sign stood in the yard. Bank owned. Auction today. I watched Darla walk out the front door for the last time. She was carrying a single box of personal items. She wore a tracksuit, not the designer dresses she used to armor herself in. She looked small. She looked ordinary. She saw my car. She stopped. For a moment, I thought she would scream. I thought she would run over and pound on the window, blaming me for the loss of her kingdom, but she didn't. She just looked at me. In her eyes, I saw the one thing she terrified her more than poverty or irrelevance. She realized that I wasn't just the daughter she had ignored. I was the architect of her new reality. She looked away, shame burning her face, and got into the passenger seat of Warren's rusted sedan. They drove away, fading into the traffic. Just another struggling couple in a city of millions. I did not feel joy. I felt a hollow, aching relief. The monster under the bed was gone. The house was just wood and brick. The power they held over me had evaporated. Now, I had work to do. $2 million, that was my seed. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't go on a vacation. I drove to the industrial district on the south side of the city, a place where the air tasted of diesel and the pavement was cracked by heavy machinery. I found a derelict warehouse that had been sitting empty for 3 years. The roof leaked, the loading docks were rusted, and the office had a family of raccoons living in the ceiling. I bought it. I used the rest of the money to buy 3 second-hand refrigerated trucks. They were high-mileage beasts, battered and scarred, but the engines were sound. I hired 2 driver's men who had been let go by Hale after the acquisition because they were too expensive. They were loyal. Hard workers who knew the routes better than any GPS. I named the company Phoenix Cold Chain, a cliché, perhaps, but it fit. Grandma Evelyn was my first visitor. She arrived in a taxi, leaning on a cane but moving with the energy of a woman half her age. She walked into the warehouse, her heels clicking on the stained concrete. She looked at the leaking roof. She looked at the old trucks. She looked at the tiny office where I had set up a folding table and a laptop. "It is ugly," she said, nodding with approval. "It is mine," I replied. "Hale has a fleet of 200 trucks," Evelyn noted, running a finger over a dusty shelf. "He has contracts with the biggest supermarket chains in the Midwest. You are a minnow swimming with a shark, Violet." "Sharks have to eat constantly," I said, booting up my laptop. "They are slow to turn. I can move fast. I can take the small jobs he thinks are beneath him, the restaurant supplies, the emergency medical transport, the farmers who can't afford his minimums." Evelyn smiled. It was the first time I had seen her truly smile since before her stroke. "I have some contacts," she said. "Old friends in the distribution game. They might take a call from me, but I will not give you money. Violet, you understand that the trust is locked. You live or die by what you make in this building." "I do not want your money, Grandma," I said. "I want to build something that no one can sign away when I'm not looking." "Good," she said. "Then get to work. That truck in Bay 2 sounds like it needs a new alternator." The next 2 years were the hardest of my life. I worked 18 hours a day. I drove trucks when drivers called in sick. I fixed refrigeration units with duct tape and prayer. I slept on a cot in the office more nights than I slept in my apartment. I smelled like engine grease and frozen fish. But every check I cashed was mine. Every client I signed was mine. I didn't see my parents. I heard about them through the grapevine. Warren was working as a greeter at a hardware store. Darla was cleaning houses off the books to make ends meet. It was a cruel irony she was now doing the invisible labor she had always looked down on. One late night, just before Christmas, I was sitting in my office. The business was stabilizing. We had expanded to 10 trucks. We had fixed the roof. The numbers were black, not red. I looked at the revenue projection on my screen. It was good. It was solid. But it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted to reclaim everything they had sold. I thought about the $80 million figure, the number that would eventually become my weapon. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was a target. I opened a drawer in my desk. Inside was a photograph of the family dinner, taken years ago, before everything fell apart. Darla was smiling that fake smile. Mason was looking arrogant. Warren was looking distracted, and I was in the corner, blurry and out of focus. I took the photo out and looked at it. "You took the first round," I whispered to the empty room. "You got your quick cash, and you lost it. But I am playing the long game." I dropped the photo into the metal trash can by my desk. I lit a match and dropped it in. I watched the faces curl and blacken, the flames eating away the smiles and the lies. "When I make it," I vowed to the silence, "when I get to the top of this mountain, you will be watching from the bottom. And if you reach up a hand for help, I will not pull you up. I will step on your fingers." The fire burned out. I kicked the trash can under the desk, picked up the phone, and dialed a supplier. It was 3 in the morning, but I had a business to run. I was Violet Parker, and I was just getting started. Success is not loud. It does not look like champagne popping in a nightclub or sports cars revving at a stoplight. Real success, I learned, is quiet. It is the hum of a server room processing data. It is the soft click of a door locking behind you in a house you own outright. It is the silence of a phone that no longer rings with debt collectors. Over the next 4 years, Phoenix Cold Chain ceased to be a scrappy startup operating out of a raccoon-infested warehouse. It became the gold standard for logistics in the Midwest. I did not win by undercutting prices. I could not compete with Grant Hale on volume. He had the market cornered on cheap, bulk transport. So I competed on truth, in the logistics game. Spoilage is the polite word for waste. It is the pallet of strawberries that arrives mushy because the driver turned off the reefer unit to save fuel. It is the vaccine shipment that becomes useless because it sat on a loading dock for 20 minutes in July. The big carriers, like Hale, wrote off spoilage as the cost of doing business. They buried it in the margins. I decided not to bury it. I hired a team of freelance developers and we built a proprietary software system I named TempGuard. It was simple but ruthless. We placed sensors not just in the trucks, but inside the individual pallets. The data was uploaded to the cloud in real time. My clients' pharmaceutical companies, high-end steakhouses, organic grocery chains could log in and see the exact temperature of their product to the decimal point, every second of the journey. If a driver turned off the cooling unit, I knew it in 30 seconds. If a door was left open, I got an alert. Grant Hale was selling transportation. I was selling accountability. The market shifted. Clients who were tired of losing 10% of their inventory to bad luck started switching to Phoenix. We grew. We bought more trucks. We bought a bigger facility. And then, we started eating into Hale's market share where it hurt the most, his high-margin accounts. I kept my head down. I did not give interviews to Forbes. I did not update my LinkedIn profile. I stayed invisible. I knew my family was out there, somewhere in the city, struggling in the wake of their own destruction. And I knew that silence was my best armor. But you cannot hide success forever, especially when you are disrupting an industry. The offer came on a rainy Tuesday in November. It did not come from Hale, who was too arrogant to admit he was losing. It came from Global Nexus, a multinational shipping conglomerate based in Zurich. They were looking to acquire a footprint in the American Midwest, but more importantly, they wanted the TempGuard source code. They wanted the technology that made my fleet efficient. The initial meeting was held in a private suite at a downtown hotel. I brought Mr. Callahan. He had aged, his hair now completely white, but his mind was as sharp as a razor. The negotiation was intense. It lasted 3 weeks. We operated under a non-disclosure agreement so strict that I could not even tell my drivers what was happening. Only Evelyn knew. She sat in her apartment, a smaller, manageable place she had moved into, and reviewed the term sheets with a magnifying glass. "They are lowballing you on the intellectual property," Evelyn said, tapping a clause with her fingernail. "They think you are a trucking company with a nice app. Make them understand that you are a technology company that owns some trucks." I went back to the table. I pushed. I leveraged their desire for the code against their reluctance to pay. I played the game my grandmother had taught me, the game my parents had failed at because they were too greedy to play it straight. The final number was agreed upon at 2 o'clock in the morning. $80 million. It was a staggering sum. It was fuck you money. It was enough to buy 10 lifetimes of security. But as I looked at the final contract, my first thought was not about buying a yacht. It was about the walls. I needed to build walls so high and so thick that Darla, Warren, and Mason could never scale them. "Before we sign," I told Callahan, "we need to secure the perimeter." We set up a fortress. First, the money would not go into a standard bank account. It would be funneled into an irrevocable trust domiciled in a state with the strongest asset protection laws in the country. The trust had one beneficiary, me. It had strict clauses that explicitly excluded any family members by blood or marriage from ever receiving a cent, regardless of hardship, illness, or legal standing. Then, we handled the undue influence angle. I knew Darla. I knew that if she found out I had $80 million, she would sue. She would claim that Evelyn was senile, that I had manipulated an old woman, that the original seed money for the company was stolen family property. She would lie, cry, and invent a narrative of victimhood to get a piece of the pie. So, we preempted her. I took Evelyn to a videographer's studio. We hired an independent psychiatrist to conduct a full competency evaluation on camera. The doctor asked Evelyn the date, the president, the math questions, the logic puzzles. Evelyn answered them all with a dry, biting wit that proved she was sharper than anyone in the room. Then, Evelyn looked into the camera. She sat straight, her hands folded over her cane. "My name is Evelyn Parker," she said, her voice steady. "I am of sound mind and body. I am recording this statement to clarify my intent regarding my estate and my business dealings with my granddaughter, Violet." She paused, staring down the lens, as if she were staring directly into Darla's eyes. "I gave Violet the initial capital because she was the only one in this family with the integrity to build something rather than steal it. My son, Warren, and his wife, Darla, are excluded from my estate, not because of an oversight, but because of their greed. They attempted to defraud Violet. They are thieves. If they contest this will, if they try to claim that Violet manipulated me, let this recording stand as my testimony from the grave. They get nothing. They deserve nothing." It was brutal. It was necessary. We filed the recording and the affidavit with the probate court, sealed and ready to be deployed the moment a lawsuit was filed. The deal with Global Nexus closed on December 10th. I was sitting in my office when the wire transfer hit. I refreshed the banking app on my phone. The number changed. Balance: $80, $1,000. $1,000, ZARS. I stared at it. I expected to feel excitement. I expected to want to scream or dance, but I just felt a profound, heavy quiet. The war of survival was over. I had won. The girl who had counted quarters for laundry, the girl who had been told she was unstable, was now one of the wealthiest women in the district. I closed the app. I did not call anyone. I did not post on social media. I went back to work. I had a transition period to manage. But secrets of that magnitude have a way of leaking. The financial world is small. Rumors of a major acquisition in the Midwestern logistics sector started circulating. No names were mentioned in the press yet, but people talk. Lawyers talk to paralegals, who talk to spouses, who talk to friends. Darla was sniffing around. I had not spoken to her in 4 years. After the house was sold, she and Warren had moved into a rental in a rundown suburb. I heard through acquaintances that Warren was drinking heavily, and that Darla had alienated every friend she had left by borrowing money she never paid back. But Darla had an instinct for money. She could smell it like a shark smells blood in the water. It started with a card. A week after the deal closed, a plain white envelope arrived at my office. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was the same handwriting that had once signed my permission slips. Inside was a generic greeting card with a picture of a dove. "Peace on earth, Violet," it read. "I know we have had our differences, but the holidays make me think of when you were little. I miss my baby girl. I hope you are doing well. Love, Mom." There was no mention of the past, no apology for the fraud, no acknowledgement of the forged signature. Just a rewrite of history where we had merely had differences, like a dispute over a curfew, rather than a felony investigation. She was fishing. She was casting a line into the dark, hoping I would bite, hoping I would open the door just a crack so she could jam her foot in. I shredded the card. I did not respond. 2 days later, the phone rang. I was alone in the office, packing up files for the transition. It was late, almost 7 in the evening. The caller ID showed a number I did not recognize. "Phoenix Cold Chain," I answered. "Hello? Violet?" The voice froze the blood in my veins. It was Darla, but it was not the shrieking, hysterical Darla from that night 4 years ago. It was the sweet, sugary Darla, the Darla who used to charm the PTA while ignoring me in the car. "How did you get this number?" I asked. My voice was flat. "Oh, it was not hard," she said lightly. "You are a businesswoman now. You are listed. Violet, please do not hang up. I am not calling to fight. What do you want? Darla?" "I want to invite you to dinner," she said. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. "Dinner," I repeated. "Christmas dinner," she said. "At the rental. It is not much. Not like the old house. But I am making a roast. Your father is well. He is not doing well. Violet, he talks about you. He regrets so much." "He regrets getting caught," I said. "He is old, Violet," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We are all getting old. Look, I know you hate us. I know you think we are monsters, but we are still your family, and I heard you are doing very well. I heard rumors about a sale." There it was, the hook. She wasn't calling because she missed her daughter. She was calling because she heard the register ring. "I am busy," I said. "It is 80 million, isn't it?" she asked. The sweetness slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the hunger underneath. "That is what people are saying. $80 million. I cannot discuss business," I said. "That is fine," she said quickly, recovering the mask. "We do not have to talk about business. Just come for dinner. Please, Mason will be there. He's trying to get back on his feet. He wants to apologize. We all do. Just one night. For the sake of Christmas. For the sake of closure." Closure. I looked at the shredder where her card lay in ribbons. I looked at the trust documents in my safe. I looked at the affidavit from Evelyn. If I stayed away, they would keep hunting. They would keep guessing. They would keep telling themselves that I was afraid of them, that I was hiding because I was weak. They would create a fantasy where I was the villain who abandoned her poor, destitute parents. But if I went, I could look them in the eye. I could show them exactly what I had become. I could prove to them that their power over me was not just broken, but pulverized. I could walk into their trap, eat their food, and leave them with the absolute certainty that they would never, ever touch a dime of my money. It was risky, but I wasn't the prey anymore. "Violet," Darla asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. "Are you there?" "I am here," I said. "Will you come? It would mean the world to your father." I ran my thumb over the edge of my desk. "Okay," I said. "I will come." "Oh, thank God," Darla breathed. "Thank God. 7 o'clock Christmas Eve." 7 o'clock, I said. "I will make your favorite," she promised. "Pecan pie." "I am allergic to pecans, Mom," I said. "I have been since I was 6. "Oh," she paused. "Right. Well, pumpkin then. We are so excited. We have so much to talk about." "Yes," I said. "We do." I hung up the phone. The office was silent. Outside, the snow was beginning to fall, dusting the windshields of the trucks in the yard. I picked up my briefcase, the same leather briefcase I had carried to the last family dinner. The one they had stared at with such greed. I opened it. I placed a single envelope inside. It contained copies of the irrevocable trust, a copy of Evelyn's affidavit, and a letter from my lawyer formally notifying them that any further contact would be considered harassment. I wasn't going there to heal. I wasn't going there to forgive. I was going there to deliver a message. I stood up and put on my coat. The $80 million was safe in the cloud, protected by layers of law and cryptography. But the real currency I was bringing to dinner wasn't money. It was the truth. I walked out of the office and locked the door. The cold air hit my face, sharp and bracing. I was ready. The rental house was a small, beige box in a subdivision that had seen better days. The siding was peeling, and the lawn was a patch of brown, frozen mud. It was a far cry from the sprawling estate where I had grown up, the fortress where my mother had once reigned like a queen. As I parked my car, I saw the silhouette of Darla standing by the window, peering through the blinds. She pulled back instantly as my headlights swept across the glass. They were waiting. I grabbed the briefcase from the passenger seat. It felt light in my hand. but I knew the paper inside weighed more than the entire house I was about to walk into. I took a breath of the sharp, winter air. This was not a homecoming. This was a demolition. I knocked. Darla opened the door before my knuckles left the wood. She was wearing an apron over a dress that I recognized it was 5 years old. Slightly frayed at the hem, her hair was done, but the dye job was cheap, the blonde turning brassy under the porch light. "Violet!" she exclaimed. Throwing her arms wide, she hugged me. It felt like being hugged by a mannequin, stiff, performative, and cold. "You made it." Come in. It is freezing." I stepped inside. The house smelled of pumpkin spice air freshener, trying too hard to mask the underlying scent of stale cigarette smoke and mildew. In the living room, a small, artificial Christmas tree blinked with mismatched lights. Warren was sitting in a recliner that had seen better decades. He struggled to get up, his joints popping. He looked frail, his eyes watery and shifting. "Hi, Dad," I said. "Violet," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "Good to see you." Mason was standing by the kitchen archway. He looked thinner, his face gaunt, wearing a polo shirt that was too big for him. He held a beer bottle with the label peeled off. "Hey, sis," he said. There was no arrogance left in his voice, only a hungry, desperate edge. "Nice coat. Cashmere. Wool blend." I lied. It was cashmere, but I wasn't there to talk about fashion. We moved to the dining table. It was a folding card table covered with a festive red tablecloth that didn't quite reach the edges. The china was mismatched the few pieces they had managed to save from the auction. We sat down. The tension was so thick it felt like humidity. Darla bustled around, serving the roast. It was overcooked, dry and gray. "So," Darla began, her voice shrill with forced cheerfulness, "tell us everything. We have missed so much. How is the little company doing?" She refused to say the name, Phoenix Cold Chain, to her. It was just a little company. "It is doing well," I said, unfolding my napkin. "We heard rumors," Mason said, leaning forward. He didn't pick up his fork. His eyes were locked on the briefcase I had placed by my feet. "People in the industry talk, even at the electronics store. You hear things. They say you sold to Global Nexus." "Is it true?" Warren asked, looking up from his plate. I took a sip of the water. It tasted like tap water and chlorine. "Yes," I said. "It is true." Darla stopped chewing. She put her fork down slowly. "And the price the rumors said," she trailed off, unable to say the number, as if saying it aloud would make it disappear. "The rumors were accurate," I said calmly. "The final sale price was $80 million. The reaction was visceral. Darla choked. It was a reflex, a physical rejection of the reality she had denied for so long. She coughed into her napkin, her eyes bulging. Warren let out a low whistle, shaking his head in disbelief. Mason slammed his beer down. $80 million, he whispered. "Jesus, Violet, $80 million? It is a lot of money," I agreed. "Where is it?" Mason asked immediately. The pretense of catching up evaporated instantly. "I mean, surely you do not have it in a checking account. You need tax shelters. You need investment vehicles. I know I lost my license, but I still know the structures. I could help you set up—" "It is already set up, Mason," I cut him off. Darla recovered from her coughing fit. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. "Violet," she said, her voice dripping with a terrifying, sugary sweetness. "This is a miracle, a blessing for the whole family. After everything we have been through, the struggle, the humiliation, finally, we can breathe again." I asked. "We are family," Darla cried, her eyes filling with those practiced tears. "I am your mother. I wiped your nose. I raised you. I know we have had our rough patch, but blood is blood. You cannot sit there with $80 million and watch your parents live in a rental like this. You cannot be that cruel." "It is not about cruelty, Mom," I said. "It is about business." "This is not business," she snapped, the sweetness cracking. This is our right. That money came from Evelyn's initial investment. That was Parker money. It belongs to the family pot. We have a legal standing. I was wondering when you would get to the legal standing, I said. I reached down and picked up the briefcase. Darla's eyes widened. She licked her lips. She thought I was bringing out the checkbook. She thought I was bringing out the surrender. I placed the bag on the table and clicked the latches open. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. I pulled out a blue folder. This, I said, sliding it across the table to Mason, is a summary of the irrevocable trust that now holds 100% of my assets. Mason opened it. He scanned the pages, his face turning paler with every line. It is locked, Mason muttered. Domiciled in South Dakota, blind trustees, no distributions to be made to any lineal ascendants or collaterals of the grantor. That means us. It explicitly names us. Mom, Darla Parker, Warren Parker, Mason Parker are permanently excluded from beneficiary status. What? Darla shrieked. She snatched the paper from Mason. You cannot do that. It is illegal to disinherit your parents. Actually, it is very legal, I said. Especially when you have a documented history of fraud against the grantor. We will sue, Warren shouted, finding his voice. We will sue for undue influence. We will say you brainwashed Evelyn. We will tie that money up in court for 10 years. I reached into the briefcase again. I expected you to say that, I said, which is why I brought this. I pulled out a second document. It wasn't a legal contract. It was a printout of an email chain. This is a communication between a law firm called Miller Associates and the legal department of Global Nexus, I said. Darla went stone still. It is dated 3 weeks ago, I continued. Before the deal even closed, Miller Associates, acting on behalf of an anonymous client, sent a letter threatening to block the acquisition unless a family settlement fund of $5 million was established in escrow. I looked at my mother. We traced the retainer for Miller Associates, I said. It was paid by a credit card in the name of Darla Parker. Mason turned to look at his mother. You tried to blackmail the deal. I was negotiating, Darla yelled, slamming her hand on the table. I knew she wouldn't give us anything I had to try. I was trying to get something for us. Mason. You almost killed the deal. Mom, Mason screamed. If Global Nexus had walked away, there would be $0. You are insane. I am the only one fighting for this family, she roared back. Stop, I said. I didn't shout. I just spoke the word. But after years of silence, my voice had weight. They stopped. You invited me here tonight to play the reconciliation card, I said. You wanted to guilt me into writing a check, but you had already tried to extort me 3 weeks ago. This dinner is a lie. The pie is a lie. You do not want me. You want the signature. So what? Darla hissed, abandoning all pretense. So what if we want the money? You have too much. You cannot spend $80 million. Why are you so greedy? Why do you hate us so much? Is this revenge? Is that what this is? You came here to dangle the money in our faces and laugh. No, I said. I did not come here to laugh. I came here to close the door. I pulled a tablet out of the briefcase. I propped it up against the centerpiece, a cheap plastic candle. There is one last thing you need to see, I said. Grandma Evelyn knew you would try to challenge her will. She knew you would try to claim she was senile. So, before she passed the baton to me, she recorded a message. I pressed play. The screen lit up. Evelyn's face appeared. She was sitting in her favorite chair, looking sharp, elegant, and formidable. Hello, Darla. Hello, Warren. Evelyn's voice filled the small, shabby room. It was like a ghost had entered the dinner party. Darla put her hands over her mouth. If you are watching this, Evelyn continued on the screen, it means Violet has succeeded. It means she has built the empire you were too lazy to build and too incompetent to steal. Turn it off, Warren whispered. I want to be very clear, Evelyn said, leaning into the camera. I did not choose Violet because she was my favorite. I chose her because she was the only one of you who understood the value of silence. Darla, You used silence as a weapon. You ignored that girl for years. You punished her with isolation. You thought that by making her invisible, you could control her. On the screen, Evelyn smiled, a cold, hard smile. But you forgot something. Darla, when you leave a child in the dark, they learn to see in the dark. You taught her how to survive without you. You taught her that your approval was worthless. You gave her the greatest gift a parent can give a child: total independence. You made her a killer, and now she has killed your greed. The video ended. The screen went black. Darla was shaking. She looked like she was vibrating apart. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "She was a bitch," Darla spat. "She was a hateful, miserable old bitch, and you are just like her." "Maybe," I said, standing up, "but I am a solvent bitch." "You are ungrateful," Darla screamed, standing up to face me. "I gave you life. I put a roof over your head. How dare you come into my house and judge me? You are nothing without me. You hear me? Nothing. I am everything without you," I corrected her. "That is what drives you crazy. You have absolutely no leverage left. No money, no guilt, no love." Mason looked up at me. He looked defeated. "Violet, please. I have debts. Real debts. People are going to break my legs." "Then you should have learned to run faster," I said. "Or maybe you shouldn't have forged my signature." I picked up my briefcase. "You are leaving?" Warren asked, his voice cracking. "Just like that. It is Christmas." "It is not Christmas," I said. "It is a transaction, and I am declining the offer." I walked to the door. "If you walk out that door," Darla screamed, her voice shredding her throat, "do not ever come back. Do not call me when you are lonely. Do not come crying to me when the money is gone and nobody loves you. You will die alone. Violet, you will die alone just like Evelyn." I stopped. I put my hand on the doorknob. The metal was cold. I turned back to look at them one last time. They were frozen in a tableau of misery. The peeling wallpaper, the fake tree, the cold food, the hate. "Mom," I said softly, "you abandoned me with silence for 5 years. You taught me that family is optional. Now, I live in peace, and I intend to be exactly as silent as you were." "Rot in hell!" Darla shrieked. I opened the door. The wind howled outside, carrying the sound of church bells from a distance. "Merry Christmas," I said. I stepped out and closed the door. Click. The sound of the latch engaging was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a vault locking. It was the sound of a book closing. I walked to my car. The snow was falling harder now, covering the dirty street in a blanket of pristine white. I got in, started the engine, and turned on the heater. I didn't look back at the house. I checked my phone. I had a flight to Zurich in 3 hours to meet with the transition team. My life was moving forward at 500 miles an hour. As I drove away, leaving the small, sad rental house in my rearview mirror, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was free. They had nothing left to sell, and I had nothing left to buy. Thank you so much for listening to Violet's story. It's been a long journey from that cold dinner table to the boardroom, and I'm glad you stuck with me until the end. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a cozy room in London, a busy street in New York, or maybe somewhere quiet in Hanoi? Please leave a comment below with your location and let me know what you thought of Violet's final move. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button to support the video, and smash the hype button so we can share this story with even more people. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong, and remember, sometimes silence is the loudest move you can make.